Thyme is native to the Western Mediterranean and it's also found around Western Asia and Southern Europe. Garden thyme is the most common variety and the type found in historical remedies. The usage of thyme dates to at least 3000 BC, where the Sumerians used thyme as an antiseptic and to clear a tired mind. Thyme has a whole range of uses, helping with everything from courage to harmony to healing to sleep and even acting as an aphrodisiac. It's also a great source of vitamin C, potassium, zinc, iron, calcium and manganese. But how does thyme appear in folklore? After all, in Maryland, when people moved house, they dug up their thyme bush and took it with them for luck. Yet it also has links with courage, protection, love and fairies. Let's find out how thyme does all of this in this week's episode of Fabulous Folklore. Hello there and welcome to Fabulous Folklore, the podcast for all things folklore, occult and just a bit weird. I'm your host Icy Sedgwick, blogger, fantasy author and your guide into these rather mysterious realms. I've got some rare things to show you, so come on in, take a look around, but be careful not to touch anything. These things sometimes bite. Well, hello there, and welcome back to Fabulous Folklore with me, your host, Icy Sedgwick. I am recording this on what is basically the hottest day of the year so far, so it's Monday the 18th of July, and the temperature where I am in Newcastle is currently 31 degrees C. It never reaches 31 degrees C in Newcastle, and quite frankly, the UK as a whole isn't really designed for these kind of temperatures. Our houses are meant to retain heat because it's usually a cold and rainy place. And yeah, nobody really knows how to deal with these kind of temperatures. So I'm basically going to be sitting in front of a fan for the rest of the afternoon after I finish recording this. So it does seem quite helpful, I think, that we're looking at a plant that does hail from the Mediterranean, given the temperatures that we have at the moment. And this does also mark the final episode of our Scarborough Fair themed episodes around the folklore of edible plants. Now we do have one more episode to come, which is more of a compendium of herbs like basil and fennel next week, but this is the end of the Scarborough Fair one, so obviously that's the refrain: parsley, sage, rosemary and thyme. So we are just going to dive right into thyme. Now one of its big uses is around courage, and thyme was supposed to bring courage before battle. Both Greek and Roman soldiers are recorded as having added it to their bats to boost their bravery. And European ladies of the court would actually embroider thyme onto their chosen knight's tunic to give him courage as well. Now you can actually do this kind of thing for yourself. You can make a little sachet from white muslin fabric and fill it with thyme, fresh or dried will do, and then pop it into the warm water of your bath and enjoy the scent. Now some people actually recommend just putting the herb straight in the bath water, but I've recommended using the sachet method instead for two reasons. One, who has the time to clear dried bits of herb out of their bath? And two, not everybody has a bath, so you can actually hang the sachets from the shower head and get a similar effect that way. Now, thyme was also believed to bring strength to anyone in need, and a cup of thyme beer was believed to cure shyness. If you wanted to attract someone specific, then braid thyme into your hair for the courage to tell them how you feel. You can also make a tea with thyme if you want to give yourself a little bit of courage that way, and just simply steep several sprigs of fresh thyme in boiling water to 5 to 8 minutes, or you can add 1 teaspoon of powdered dry thyme to boiling water for the same effect. Please be careful though before you use thyme, because some people can be allergic to it. Now thyme has been used for purification for a really long time, and it's been used as an antiseptic to treat wounds, soothe digestion and clear the head, and it also appeared in Maundy posies, so Margaret Baker suggested it may have had some value in repelling the plague, or at least people think that it did. People actually added thyme to nosegays to ward off illness because thyme helped to hide bad smells. This dates back to that time, a little bit like the plague folklore that we've covered before, where people thought that illness was caused by bad smells, so if you could ward off the bad smells, you could ward off illness, and that's kind of the whole point of a nosegay. And because of how strong thyme smells, obviously adding that to something would then therefore give it these good purification properties. The smoke of thyme also held value in purification practices, because Greek priests burned thyme as incense to help purify their temples. In Germany, people gathered wild thyme at midsummer and mixed it with cinders from the Christmas fires to fumigate apple trees. And you can also use thyme for your own mini purification rites. So as well as the option I gave you earlier for making a sachet for your bath, there was also a specific ritual which involved, in the spring, crushing thyme and sweet marjoram into a bath to cleanse yourself of past ills and sorrow. Now, like the other plants in the edible herbs series, thyme does appear in relation to funerals, except it does so around very specific ones, because it's actually tossed into the grave when a member of the Order of Oddfellows is buried. Now, the Order of Oddfellows dates back to 1730 and was first founded in London. Ultimately, they promoted reciprocity, philanthropy and charity. Try saying that quickly. But there are various reasons as to where their unusual name came from, and Stephanie Mueller suggested it refers to people who essentially did odd trades for a living. So as they didn't have a specific trade, much like goldsmith or jeweller or tailor, they couldn't enjoy the benefits or security offered by one of the trade guilds. So the order therefore gave them the chance to be a part of a group of odd fellows. And I quite like that idea that just because you didn't do a specific trade and couldn't join a specific guild, your specific guild then became the fact that you didn't have a specific trade, which is just so delightfully eccentric. But back to thyme. Instead of being a funeral flower, its death connection came about a little differently, because people thought the souls of the dead lingered in thyme flowers, and this was especially the case with the souls of murdered men, and this belief was quite prevalent in England. And strangely enough, there's also a path at Dronfield in Derbyshire where a young man murdered his girlfriend, and she was carrying a bunch of thyme. So in this case, obviously, thyme then gets attached to these different stories around death and murder. But surprisingly, thyme actually didn't appear in funeral wreaths or bouquets, and this was apparently because, and I quote, "the dead have nothing to do with thyme," end quote. You have to love a pun. Now, thyme was far more useful in the realm of love and romance, and that's probably because the plant was sacred to Venus, and worshippers apparently brought both roses and thyme to her statue in Eric's Sicily, and obviously there is the episode on roses way back in the back catalogue. Harrington recommends having a thyme plant in your house as a mini altar to Venus, and the plant will also help bring you courage and love. And of course, you can also tuck a sprig of thyme in your hair to make yourself irresistible. If you want to know who you're going to marry, you can use both thyme and rosemary to do so. On St. Agnes Eve, girls were directed to put a thyme leaf in one shoe and a rosemary sprig in the other. Then they were to put them on either side of the bed while reciting the charm, "St. Agnes, that's to lovers kind, come ease the trouble of my mind." And then with any luck, she would actually dream of the person she was going to marry. And in case you want to try that, the Eve of St. Agnes is January 20th. Meanwhile, in Sweden, people sewed garlic and thyme into the bridegroom's clothes to prevent him from being bewitched on the way to the church. Now, as with many other edible herbs, thyme also offered a degree of protection from evil, and placing thyme under your pillow could help drive away nightmares. Wearing thyme could ward off evil during your daily errands, and you just simply had to pin it to your clothing to get the benefit of that. People put thyme around doors and windows to deter evil, and they might also pin it around the entrance to a barn. Other people carried thyme to ward off disaster and encourage good luck. And in Germany, people would actually hang up thyme to keep witchcraft specifically out of their house. Now, given how many plants have similar uses, I do sometimes wonder if people stuck to just one plant or kind of just put all of them up at the same time for kind of extra protection. And I just have visions of people not being able to get in their door because there's just that many plants hanging up. But maybe that's just the way my brain works. If you do have spaces that you want to protect, then obviously you can hang up bunches of thyme to do that. And thyme has the advantage of both protecting people and helping them to feel brave. And this is of course quite helpful if you grow your own thyme and you want to dry it, because you naturally have to hang it up in order to help it dry. So you're essentially doing two things at once there. But Christina Oakley Harrington does advise that you tie the bunches with red thread, since red represents fortitude. And if you then decide that you want to sprinkle dried thyme around your home, which is another way of doing it in order to have that element of protection, you can do so from a red cloth or bowl. And finally, you can also make a pouch to carry thyme with you to help ward off bad luck or harm, and this will help to provide protection and help you to be brave. A red pouch makes the most sense, but Harrington recommends that you use a green pouch if you also need Venus's protection. Now, thyme apparently gave the ability to see fairies, and the folklore's a little bit muddled as to why this is, because in one legend, fairies enjoyed dancing among thyme, so obviously going looking for thyme would in theory help you to see fairies there as well. Whereas other people think that they just simply live among fairies, and that's where it gets a little bit confused. But during the medieval period, people thought that you could find fairies, elves or witches in banks where you could then find thyme. And Shakespeare actually bears this out in A Midsummer Night's Dream when Oberon says, and I quote, "I know a bank where the wild thyme blows," end quote. Now, I personally would urge caution in going looking for fairies, but Christina Oakley Harrington recommends finding places where wild thyme grows in plentiful supply, and you're essentially looking for plenty of bushes here, not just the one, and this should show you where fairies might live. She does recommend leaving an offering for them, and cream or honey are good choices. Now, ultimately, I think that Venus's stewardship over the plant helps to explain its association with love and purification, and its use for protection also hints at the clues that we have to Venus's earlier origins as a goddess of war. But if you like the sound of thyme's range of powers, you can actually grow your own. And in the UK, you can sow thyme seeds in March and April, or plant seedlings from April right through to August. So there is still time to plant your seedlings if you'd like to. You'll need to choose a sunny spot with well-drained soil, but you can always grow it in pots if your soil is wrong, according to the Royal Horticultural Society. Now, thyme doesn't actually like too much water, so do be careful not to overwater them, but do make sure that any pots that you have don't dry out if you do have a dry or hot spell. And basically, when it does then start to grow, you ultimately just have to keep harvesting, because that's what actually helps them to grow more leaves. And if you do want to use thyme in lotions and potions, then obviously I would recommend that you learn herbalism for yourself. There are a lot of resources online. They do vary in quality though, and that's why I always end up recommending Ronin Sage to people if you want to learn herbalism. So learn it from someone who actually has a lot of knowledge but also understands the ethics of herbalism as well. And I do have a link for that, so if you want to do the kitchen herbalism course that Ronin Sage offer, if you use my link in the show notes, you can get 15% off, so that's well worth bearing in mind. But thyme is an absolutely fabulous plant. It does have a lot of interesting uses in terms of folklore, but then obviously it does also make your food taste really nice as well. So I think this is one of the advantages of these edible plants that we've come across throughout these different bits of folklore, that indeed a lot of these plants do double, triple, quadruple, quintuple duty across different things, as well as also being useful in food. And finally, just to close this out, to bring the Scarborough Fair theme to an end, in case you haven't heard the earlier episodes, obviously there was a theory that the refrain in the song Scarborough Fair that inspired this set of posts basically was a work of love magic, which again would fit in really nicely with thyme. And the bouquet involved in the song contains parsley, sage, rosemary and thyme. And one translation of that does suggest the meanings of the bouquet, that parsley means I want to have babies with you, sage means I'm dependable, rosemary means remember me, and thyme means I'm yours. So obviously it is indeed one way to send a message. Of course, I would also point out that thyme also meant in the Victorian language of flowers activity, so I think you can make of that what you want. So what I'd love to know is what you use thyme for. Do you use it in a protective or a magical sense? Is it part of your beauty routine? Do you use it for medicinal purposes, or do you just really like the plant? Feel free to let me know. Again, you can always comment on the video if this is on YouTube. You can comment on the blog post that this episode is attached to, and the link to that is below. You can always grab me on Twitter or Instagram, whatever. Do let me know what you use thyme for, because it is quite nice to collect all of these things together. Like I said at the start of the episode, our final July episode is going to be like a compendium of different types of edible herbs that just didn't fit in with this theme. So I've got some chamomile in there, I've got basil in there, there's fennel in there, oregano in there. So those kind of plants is what we're looking at next week to wrap everything up. I think I said this before, the bonus episode available to Patreon supporters this month is on the folklore of ferns, and that is available at the £3.50 a month or higher tier. So if you're interested in that, then you can obviously follow the link below to Patreon and hopefully join everybody and get access to an entire backlog of exclusive articles, little snippet storytelling episodes, and the bonus episodes as well. But anyway, I'll leave it there. I'm going to go and put the fan on because it is really, really hot now. And I'll see you next week when we're going to have a look at all things delicious and herby. Cheerio. Well, thanks for listening, and I hope you enjoyed that episode. If you did, feel free to leave a review wherever you listen to podcasts, because that helps other people find the show too. It also takes between 4 and 6 hours to research, write, record and edit these episodes, so if you want to help support my time in doing that, then you can buy me a coffee. Or you can join the Fabulous Folklore family on Patreon and enjoy extra benefits, including exclusive episodes and articles and even illustrated talks. All the links you need are below, and thanks in advance.